Hi everyone, this is Ricky Spencer and welcome for another of our series, Voices, the Sociology of Media. And today we have somebody that I totally admire, and I'm actually a bit nervous about having our Aunty Barbara Nicholson interviewed, but I think you will get so much out of this interview, and I hope that we can do something to support Aunty Barbara's important work. So I'm going to start by just reading a little bit about Aunty Barbara Nicholson. And this was taken from when she received her Honorary Doctorate of Law at the University of Wollongong, because I think it positions the dedication and achievements of a strong Aboriginal woman. And I know that she's very modest in her achievements, but I really wanted to use the power of language just to reinforce just how important her work is still. So too often the remarkable achievements of the more modest amongst us go unrecognized. Too often the perseverance, the generosity and the selflessness, the dedication and the enduring impact of those without big egos or exalted offices aren't honoured and celebrated as they should be. And through her recognition, Aunty Barbara Nicholson is honoured as a leader, a teacher, a poet, an activist, and an inspirational role model, a woman whose thirst for knowledge and learning and deep commitment to justice spurred her to great achievement. Born on the Aboriginal Reserve at Kimblamarawara, Barbara was fortunate to have a mother who denied the opportunity to pursue higher learning herself, rose about great personal adversity to instill in her daughter the importance of education. We acknowledge those who cannot be here today, who have guided and inspired Barbara throughout her life, learning the indelible mark. It is fitting that many of Barbara's children and grandchildren were at present to hear this special day where she was honoured with her doctorate. They are a source of great pride to her and are a key part of a journey of achievement. For decades, Barbara Nicholson has been at the forefront of grassroots campaign to achieve justice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of Australia. She was a driving force behind Link Up, an organisation committed to reuniting and supporting families and individuals affected by Australia's removal policies. Her commitment to tackling the overrepresentation of Indigenous Australians in the criminal justice system saw her give many years of service to the Aboriginal Deaths in Custody Watch Committee and bring tertiary education and creative writing opportunities to Koori inmates. I could read on and on, but I just wanted to give everyone a little snippet of the incredible work that we're going to hear about through this incredible human being. And I now welcome Barbara Nicholson to our show, and also her production and project coordinator, Simon, as well. So over to you first, Barbara, and welcome so much to our show today.
Oh my goodness, Ricky, it's an absolute honour to be part of your programs and to be feeding into it. I had little idea when I stood on top of the steps at the library in Melbourne and saw you struggling up the steps early one morning and greeting you in what I hope was a cordial way. And then we chatted for a while there, and the day progressed, and we rubbed shoulders numerous times during that day. Then the following day I'm standing on the steps and there you are again. I recall saying to you, we'll have to stop meeting like this. The people will get suspicious. And I think instantly we knew we had some sort of a wonderful connection. And that is just very precious to me. But for you to then, I know we've kept in touch via text messages and occasional phone calls, but I had no idea that that casual meeting could ever develop into what we're sitting here today looking at. I am so honoured that you have included me in this project that you work on,
No,
and you work on so diligently.
so I will start up, Aunty Barb. We've got Simon with us, so perhaps you'd like to introduce Simon to everybody who's watching and listening to this podcast.
Okay, Simon Hurst is the project coordinator on our project we are called Nagana Barangarai, which in coastal languages here from Sydney, up and down a little bit from Sydney. Coastal comes from that coastal language and it means black wallaby. And Simon is the project coordinator for what we do. We have had him on board now for 3 years, I think so. But Simon's actually been on the project from its inception nearly 12 years ago. So in various capacities, usually as a tutor, but on a number of occasions, always as a very dear and close friend. And I'm very happy to have him on board. Simon, you can say something now.
Thanks. Look, apologies. I've got a touch of the old COVID at the moment, so my voice is a bit raspy. But yeah, look, it's been a real privilege to work on this project with Aunty Barbara over the last 11, 12 years. I was fortunate enough to be invited to participate on the very first time we went into the jail and met with the lads for the first time and started what has become quite an amazing project, I think. It seems to be getting more and more recognition. The books are consistently thick. And I think, one of the biggest testaments to the project is that it's now in some ways being driven by the inmates. We were in Junee last week. There were so many who came along because they participated before and they wanted to make sure that they participated again. And even during the lockdown year when no one could visit the jail, we weren't able to go. The inmates kept writing. They produced the book themselves. And so, one of our biggest volumes, wasn't it?
That's wonderful. So let's now take a step back and let's now talk a bit about this very important space. So many times we see on the media how Indigenous rates of incarceration are triple to that of any other race or group of people in Australia. What got you into this space, Auntie, that you felt you wanted to do some action or some change?
Oh, goodness me. I think at 3.5 years of age, I was at school, in the Catholic school here in Port Kembla, just a couple of 100 yards from where I live. And I got expelled at 3.5 from school because they wouldn't let me go to the toilet, and I had a wetty in my little drinking cup in the passageway between the desks. So I think getting expelled, and I use that in a bit of jocularity there, at 3.5 years of age, I think I look back now and I think that's where the seeds of social justice were sown. It was so unfair. Not that they expelled me, but they wouldn't let me have a wetty in the toilet. That was the social injustice. I think as I look back, the hindsight, of course, tells me that. So, and I think it festered away for many, many years. And as my children became older and I was able to become more involved, it was, I just grabbed it. I just grabbed it and ran with it. And it was amazing. And then in the 80s, with the emergence of the Aboriginal Deaths in Custody Watch Committee, and at the time, what was happening was the push to get a Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody, and we were really pushing hard and hard and hard on that. And in the time that I spent with the Watch Committee, I spent many times facing up with families of victims and looking at all of the hard stuff and going to jail, seeing what was going on, and becoming more and more depressed, I think, about it, and, you know, that something has to be done. We're still in that mode. Something has to be done because that doesn't change, even though that Royal Commission finished with 339 recommendations to that would change things, but the rate of incarceration, the rate of overrepresentation at all levels of justice system, from police, from arrest right through to sentencing and beyond.
And
It's
when you were actually going to visit people in those spaces, what was one of the things that stood out to you the most?
That's a really good question, Ricky. It's really hard to separate the most, which was the most, because they're all so graphically important. You know, the absolute grief and dare I say anger with the families, because no sensible answers come through, no resolutions come through. Absolute total frustration at so many of the authorities who were so racist, it was beyond belief. You know, oh, they're just a black fellow, it doesn't matter. You know, look, he would have died anyway, he had acute diabetes, you know, or some silly thing like that. You know, the total ignorance was so absolutely frustrating, and you can't change that in the moment. And it's in the moment that people, the bereaved families, need every bit of love, affection, and consideration and assistance that is possible. But that really didn't happen that much. The grief is.
I was going to ask the both of you, do you find, I guess, when you go into these spaces, that in some ways through the system, not necessarily perhaps the workers, although it's reinforced through their agencies, that there is still that embedded structural racism within that space?
You do see it. It's less obvious now than it was in the past. That's what I think. What do you think, Simon, on that?
I think the structural racism is probably most obvious in just the numbers, the sheer numbers of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island prisoners. I think you just need to look at that high proportion, roughly is it 30% of prisoners in Australia are First Nations, and, you know, you've got to work back from there as the first point, I think.
Yeah, I think so. But look, all of those earlier experiences, and then I kept on in an education capacity with visiting jails even after I left the Watch Committee, and I was enrolled with Southern Cross University, who are in Lismore, but they had outreach degree programs that reached into prisons. So wherever there was a prison with Koori inmates, they could tap into their degree programs that come from the Goulburn Gaol Centre in what was then the Goulburn Gaol Centre at Lismore, Southern Cross Uni. And I used to go as a one-on-one tutor. I was contracted by the university to go as a one-on-one tutor to Goulburn Gaol. I had a number of different students there over a number of years. A couple of them got through they actually did get through their degree program. But a lot of the lads used to really just freely write poetry, and some of it is absolutely beautiful poetry. And I remember at the time, this was when I was attending Goulburn Gaol as that educator, then I remember thinking it'd be really good to get a book of their poetry out. And I thought, yeah, I even had a title, Inside Out. Well, of course, that's been done 100 times, but I didn't know it at the time. I'm going back a long time now. And I did approach the authorities at Goulburn Gaol, and it fell on deaf ears. They didn't want to know. It was pretty hard, but I still hankered after the thought that notion that could happen. So fast forward a few years, and then I got the opportunity to. What had happened? I'll have to backtrack. Sorry, I might ramble a bit. One of the students I had at Goulburn Gaol, he was only a few months out from finishing his degree, and he got transferred to Junee Jail. And Southern Cross Uni weren't actually going to cover me to go there or finance me to go there, because they used to provide hire cars, blah, blah. But to go to Junee, it would have also, when I was doing Goulburn, it was day trips back and forth from my home in Wollongong to Goulburn. Junee would require me to have at least 2 nights accommodation just to have one session with the inmate. But anyway, I went anyway, and I managed to get that young fella finally through his degree, and he did. He got through. In that process, I met the cultural programs officer at the jail, who was, can I name him, Simon? I don't know.
He's in all the books. I don't see why you wouldn't. Yeah.
Right, he is too. He's in the book. Jerome Broden, who was the cultural programs officer, and I met him. Okay, a few years after that, got an opportunity to, with the South Coast Writers Centre, to do a writers' tour around the Riverina area on what was known as Right Around the Murray, as in WRITE, Right Around the Murray Festival. We got a bit of funding to do that, myself and 2 others, and we went along to a number of locations. We needed 1 more location, and so I nominated the jail, maybe because I'd had that contact, maybe that person was still there, and anyway, so we did, and we got a day's work, 1 day workshop there, not workshops, just readings and so on. But that renewed the contact with Jerome Broden, and then we had this notion of, Jerome asked us if we'd like to go down again the following year in NAIDOC week and do a series of creative writing workshops. We did. We managed to do that, and it was a bitterly cold winter, but we did this series of workshops, and I remember saying, Simon and I travelled down together, and on the way we had funds for myself and 4 other tutors. We didn't get the 4th tutor, so we had a little bit of money left over. And there was no real vision. We were just going to go down there and do a week's worth of workshops, and that would be that. But I can't go and do that and be that breastfeeder, that comes back out at the end of the week and says, oh, look, aren't I marvellous? Look what I've done. No, we're not into that at all. And I had this bit of money left over, $750 or thereabouts. And I said, down, do you think that'd be enough money to get a little desktop publication out? And he agreed that we could possibly do that. So I wanted to have something to give back to the inmate contributors so that they got something for their time, their effort, their attention. And so that's what we did. Now, the South Coast Writers Centre was auspicing us. So we come back with the handwritten manuscripts, and the then director of the South Coast Writers Centre was Ricky Vasilakis, and She's a wonderful worker, and she and I worked together to try and get these rough handwritten manuscripts into something that looked like a book. And we worked on it for quite a while, and then the day came, we'd got the University of Wollongong Press had agreed to print it for us. And I was with Ricky on the day we sort of finalised the layout and everything, and was just about ready to send off. And Ricky was just about to press the send button on the document, and I said, "Stop." And she said, "What?" And I said, "Put volume 1 on that." Now that might have been a bit prescient of me. I had no idea that it was ever going to be any more than volume 1. And certainly we didn't start off with the notion that we were going to be in there for the long haul producing book after book after book. No way did that ever enter our heads. But we put volume 1 on it, and here it is.
Oh my God. And it was called Dreaming Inside.
It's called Dreaming Inside. And the boys, the Aboriginal contributors to this, they selected that title themselves. That was their title. So, and we've kept it. And we still call it Dreaming Inside all the way through. This one was only 38 pages long. We only had half a dozen inmate contributors. We're up to book 10.
Book 10, wow.
I think we had, did you count the contributors in this, Simon?
Oh, I did a long time ago. Maybe 30 or 40.
Oh, I thought it was about 60, but you know, you might be right. Can we say 50? Yeah, no, around about that. And we're 130 odd pages. And that's consistent. That's volume 10. Again, that's an extract of their own artwork. All the front cover diagrams are artwork. That's volume 9.
Incredible.
So I'll go back to the beginning. That was volume 2. It was a little bigger than volume 1. I think we had about 60 pages, maybe. Yeah, something about that. Yeah. Volume 3. Volume 4, all inmate artwork. That's your cell door. So
incredible, Aunty and Simon, that you're part of this beautiful collaboration. Can I ask you both, what's it like? I mean, when you hand back a copy or you give a copy to a contributor, what's that feeling like? That you feel yourselves and the person?
Look, oh gosh, for me, I guess, you know, it's just such a pleasure because they're published authors now. You know, and here's a lot of fellows who can hardly write. His spelling is all over the shop, who have never heard of grammar or plagiarism. And we have to monitor that because you know it's just a wonderful dynamic. I think it's always a thrill. They always tell us right from the very beginning, from the very first workshop, so they've got volume 1 out, they say, "I can't write." Yeah, but I don't know how to write. And, you know, and I say, well, you know, I've got 10 books that say you can. So just with that little bit of help, that little bit of encouragement, that little bit of the right to sit unjudged and be yourself and tell your own story, perhaps, you know, bear your own soul, write your own words with total freedom, you know, from being judged. So I think that to me, it's a real thrill. You know, the great thing for them is that, you know, here are a lot of lads that have had little opportunity in life. And, you know, I say to them, when you write for us, you become a published author. That is so huge for them. It's so huge. What about you, Simon?
Look, I think the one of the things I really like is just because you get such a range of writers. You get some people who are sort of well on their way. They're writing poems, they're writing songs, they're writing raps, and you get others who, they can't, read or write or can't read or write really well. And I just find it a real it's an eye opener to sit down next to someone and let them tell you their story and you write it down. I worked with a guy the other week when we were down there last week. And it was really funny, actually, because he wanted to know what the book would look like. I went and grabbed a copy of volume 10. I went and sat down next to him and opened it up at random and said, well, this is what it looks like. And he looked at the page and he went, and this is a true story. He looked at the page and went, that's my brother. And the page that I was the page that his brother had written some stuff on. And I think he was a bit reluctant before that, but he saw that. And then, so he wanted to participate. So I just sat with him and he told me his story and he didn't feel confident writing himself. So I just wrote it down for him in his words and then read it out to him at the end. And I've seen this a few times before and it's just that look on their face and they go, yeah, I'm happy with that. That's my story. And it's just a chance for them to share something of what they've been through with the world is just priceless. It's just, it's so important. And Aunty Barb, you'll probably talk a bit more about how you'd love more judges and prosecutors and police and magistrates to be able to read some of these stories and get an idea of what some of these people have been through.
It's the backstories of everything that goes on in a courtroom, but the stories that are never heard in a courtroom, and they should be. I sat last week with one lad we've had in the past. We had him in volume 4 when I first encountered him. He disappeared, but he was back there last week. And one of the poems that he wrote, he didn't actually, I actually penned it, but in his words, and then we shaped it. I'm just having a bit of trouble. I'm trying to find it, but gosh, his work is just so good. I'll put it aside. I'll get Simon to send you the poem. All right.
What it just shows me, Auntie, is that it's quite clear that what you're both doing is you're giving a sense of power through voice in the written form.
I think that's right. They do become empowered. There's generally, I think, if you see the same inmate on a number of occasions, you do see growth in that way. We don't always have that opportunity because prisons are a transient place. You might not see them more than once. And like we're there for a week and we do workshops morning and evening and morning and afternoon. Sorry, but we might someone might come for the morning session, you don't see them again. And when you go back the next visit, they're not there. So for whatever reason, they might have got released or transferred or whatever. But
and part of that process, isn't it, is allowing that voice to have its own power. So we can't offer editorial support because we can't go back to that person and just ring them up the next day and say, hey, what do you mean by this? Or, was just saying they may not be there the next time we go back. So we take what they write on face value and we put it down as they write it. And unless they request us to do otherwise, and sometimes they do, if we put it as how they spelt it, how they write it, it could be what appears to us random capital letters through some stories, but perhaps there's meaning for them. I'm not going to judge what they're putting there. And words, the very way they set them down has their own power. That's the authentic voice of those people, isn't it?
That's exactly right. It's everything in the book is first draft. So you get it, warts and all.
Absolutely.
Bad grammar, whatever.
Right.
The only thing, like, we limit editorial interference in it. Of course, there's certain things you've got to be careful of, like plagiarism and so on and so on. But and then maybe some legal requirements, that you've got to be very careful about with what you let get published. But in terms of actually working with the work they do, possibly the only difference I make, something handwritten manuscript might come to you and it looks like prose, but it sounds like poetry. If it sounds like poetry, I shape it to look like a poem on the page. That's about
It's wonderful. So what we might do at this point, because we're going to stop at this point and we're going to restart again. Thank you, Aunty Barb and Simon, for this. And in part 2, we are now going to explore a little bit more in detail the processes of this incredible work.
Thank you very much, Ricky. It's lovely.
Thanks.